The Quran is not just a religious book meant to be recited in times of difficulty or placed on a high shelf for decoration. It is a divine guide, a living message, and a complete system of life. When Allah sent down the Quran, it wasn't to preserve culture, it was to correct it. The Quran confronted deeply rooted practices of the Quraysh that had become normalized over generations. Practices like female infanticide, tribal arrogance, exploitation of the poor, and blind loyalty to ancestral customs were not just challenged, they were abolished through the Quranic revelation. This pattern remains the same for every society and every generation. When cultural norms contradict divine revelation, the Quran must take precedence, no matter how deeply entrenched those norms are. Unfortunately, in many Muslim communities today, culture has taken on the status of sacred tradition. We've inherited ways of thinking, ways of living, and social structures that we follow blindly, not because they're in line with the Quran, but because they're familiar. We do things because this is how it's always been done, not because this is what Allah commands. This mindset is dangerous because it slowly pushes the Quran to the margins of our lives. It becomes a book of blessings and rituals, but no longer a source of personal transformation and societal reform. That's not what the Quran was meant to be. When you examine how Muslims deal with issues like marriage, inheritance, family roles, justice, and education, you'll often find that cultural norms dictate the decisions, not divine guidance. For instance, women are denied their rightful share in inheritance under the pretext of tradition. Arranged marriages are forced upon young people without their consent, simply because this is how our culture works. Respect for elders is turned into silencing youth. None of this reflects the spirit of the Quran. In fact, it violates the justice and wisdom the Quran upholds. And the worst part is that we use religion to justify cultural practices, twisting ayahs and hadiths to fit cultural molds. But the Quran was never meant to conform to culture. It was meant to transform it. When Allah says in the Quran, "We have certainly sent down to you a book in which is your mention. Then will you not reason?" 21:10, he is reminding us that our dignity, our success, and our future lies in returning to this book. It speaks to our problems not just from 1,400 years ago, but today, right now. If we want to live with dignity, we must let the Quran guide us through every issue. It must be the foundation of our identity, the lens through which we see the world, and the standard by which we judge our actions. It's time to stop letting culture dictate our Islam. Instead, let Islam rooted in the Quran reshape our culture, because only when we put the Quran back in its rightful place above all else will we truly find the guidance, clarity, and peace we've been searching for. There is a significant difference between the divine guidance of Shariah and the human, constructed customs of culture. Yet in many Muslim societies today, the two have been so deeply intertwined that people struggle to tell them apart. Practices that have no foundation in the Quran or the Sunnah are often carried out with religious fervor, while actual commands of Allah are ignored or overridden. This confusion creates a distorted understanding of Islam, turning a religion of mercy and justice into one that appears rigid and oppressive. The essence of Shariah is divine wisdom. It is meant to protect the rights of individuals, establish justice, and ensure the moral well-being of society. But when cultural elements creep into religious practice without scrutiny, they corrupt the very purpose of divine law. Take, for example, how marriage is handled in many communities. The Quran gives both men and women the right to choose their spouses. Yet, cultural practices often deprive young women of this right, forcing them into marriages to protect family honor or maintain tribal connections. Consent becomes a formality rather than a genuine choice. This isn't Shariah, this isn't what the Prophet taught. It's a cultural injustice disguised as religion, or consider the issue of divorce. The Quran allows it as a last resort with fairness and respect. But in many cultures, divorced women are stigmatized, blamed, and even disowned, regardless of their circumstances. Again, this is not Islam, it's a cultural mindset that contradicts the Quran's call for compassion and dignity. Another area where culture overrides Shariah is in gender roles. While Islam clearly outlines responsibilities and rights for both men and women, culture often imposes exaggerated expectations on one gender while absolving the other. Men are sometimes given unchecked authority in the household without accountability, while women are expected to remain silent even when abused. This imbalance is not from Allah. The Quran and Sunnah emphasize fairness, mutual respect, and partnership in the family. Shariah is not meant to serve patriarchy, it's meant to serve truth. What we need is to return to the foundational sources of our faith, the Quran and the authentic Sunnah. These sources must be our filter. If a practice aligns with them, we embrace it. If it contradicts them, we leave it, even if it's something our grandparents did. That's the attitude of true submission to Allah. The Prophet Ibrahim broke idols built by his people, even though those idols represented generations of tradition. Why? Because truth doesn't bow to tradition. Truth demands loyalty even if it means challenging what is familiar. Muslims today must become more educated about their faith, not just through cultural inheritance, but through sincere study. Only then can we differentiate between what Allah has commanded and what society has invented. Shariah is not the problem. Cultural misrepresentation is, and if we don't distinguish between the two, we risk living a version of Islam that is more cultural than it is Quranic. The Quran places justice at the core of its message, making it a defining feature of divine guidance. Allah commands justice not as an ideal, but as a practical and non-negotiable principle for individuals and societies. In Surah An-Nisa 4:135, Allah says, O you who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even though it be against yourselves or your parents or your kin. This verse is a powerful call to rise above personal bias, family loyalty, tribal affiliation, or cultural preference. Justice in the Quran is not a suggestion, it's a command. Yet in many cultures today, particularly within Muslim majority societies, cultural loyalties and social expectations often override the Quran's demand for justice. Tribalism, favoritism, nepotism, and double standards dominate many community decisions. When someone in a position of power commits wrongdoing, culture often steps in to protect them. But when a poor or powerless individual errs, they are punished swiftly and harshly. This is the opposite of what the Prophet taught. In fact, he once said, by Allah, if Fatima, the daughter of Muhammad, were to steal, I would cut off her hand. This wasn't about cruelty. It was about impartial justice, showing that no one is above the law. In contrast, cultural justice is often based on asterisk, who asterisk you are, not asterisk, what asterisk you've done. Many traditional customs are built on maintaining status, preserving honor, and protecting reputation, even at the cost of fairness. Families will hide abuse, lie about financial matters, or slander others simply to maintain social image. Such practices are deeply unjust and completely un-Islamic. The Quran's vision of justice goes beyond courtrooms. It applies in families, workplaces, business transactions, and even in how we treat strangers. But culture sometimes teaches us to be loyal to people, not principles. This is where conflict arises. Islamic justice also protects the vulnerable, orphans, women, the poor, minorities, yet cultural systems often marginalize these very groups. In some societies, women are denied property rights. In others, orphans are taken advantage of. People may give in charity for show, but underpay their workers or manipulate the poor. This isn't the justice the Quran calls for. This is selective righteousness built on hypocrisy. The Quran calls us to a higher standard, one that reflects Allah's attributes of fairness, mercy, and balance. What's needed is a revival of Quranic justice, not just in speeches and sermons, but in action. Every Muslim must hold themselves accountable first. Justice must begin in the home, in how we deal with our children, how we divide inheritance, how we resolve conflict. Leaders must be held to account. Communities must prioritize truth over loyalty. And when cultural traditions obstruct the path to justice, those traditions must be challenged and, if necessary, abandoned. Because without justice, faith becomes hollow. Rituals become empty and Islam loses its transformative power. Real Islam, Quranic Islam, demands that justice always be served, no matter the cost. One of the most serious consequences of confusing culture with religion is the growing disconnection between Muslim youth and their faith. Young people are seeking answers, authenticity, and a sense of belonging. But often what they encounter is not the Quranic message of mercy, justice, and purpose. It's a rigid, cultural version of Islam wrapped in fear, control, and shame. When young Muslims ask questions, they are silenced. When they express confusion or doubt,